So when we sit quietly, really intense emotions, sensations can come up. These might be accompanied with a memory or a worry or a craving, and they can be really hard to sit through. And we can be convinced that we shouldn't be wasting our time sitting, and we should address this issue. And it can be a real battle. But the real strength comes from sitting through this. When we have formal meditation, we sit for a specified time. That's 20 minutes or a bit longer or very long. But if there's a specified time that we've set out, that we've marked for formal meditation, we know we've got enough time to address anything afterwards. But in the moment, we can use that knowledge of that, knowing that for the next period of time we're going to sit through this. And it can get very intense, especially when you start sitting for very long. It's like a car with its foot on the accelerator. It just keeps getting faster and faster and more intense. But if we can sit through these intense emotions, we see that they're impermanent, and if we can really manage to investigate through this and see that this sensation of, I don't know, anger or misery or even heat or itchiness or childhood memory or worry about the future, if we keep not suppressing it but just letting it stay there while sitting with the breath or the body, whatever we've decided to sit with, we can see that these hold less weight and less sway over us. And then when we practice repeatedly, they become less strong. And this is the way that the mind, in Theravadan Buddhism, it's referred to as purifying the mind. These thoughts and feelings and sensations are always in the body, and that period of quietness allows us for these to escape. Longpo Sumedho in the Thai forest tradition referred to it as a mental enema, which is a phrase that's, I don't know, graphic enough for it to stick in my memory, at least, and it really sort of shows the real value of these thoughts and feelings. When we internalise these worries, they can seem so important, like these massive obstacles that we need to overcome. But when we let these worries or strong thoughts disappear, we realise they were just burdening us, and we become lighter. And with that lack of burden, we can see more clearly. Life becomes easier to deal with. We can have that space, and we can observe ourselves, and we can see ourselves self-sabotaging, and then when we've got that separation where we observe the thoughts and we're not our thoughts, we're not so hard on ourselves. We can laugh and look at ourselves self-sabotaging without it feeling personal. We just see that as our conditioning, because our personalities are all based on our experiences, and we, especially our childhood experiences, we can't really control, but they do form who we are. If we're naturally happy or naturally sad or naturally angry or naturally guilty, or we observe this habit pattern in meditation, going back to these same patterns, and then we notice that it's not us, it's just external conditioning, and then it carries less weight. We're less bound, we're less controlled by these things. It's when we believe that we are our personality rather than we are carrying a personality that's based on external factors. Then we're reducing our suffering. And we can also, with that space, we notice the suffering of other people more. And it can be quite painful to see the suffering of other people, when before we were consumed with our own pain and we didn't notice. The world can seem full of horror and pain in people, and you can see it in people's eyes, you can see it in how they hold their body, like these deep traumas that they're carrying, these self-sabotaging behaviours. And the deeper the suffering, the easier it is to see in other people, and we can help with that when we've developed that space. But we need to start with ourselves first, and then there's a natural inclination to help others, and for me it's sometimes it's almost selfish, because seeing other people in pain is almost unbearable, and sometimes say with my dog, if sometimes she's suffering immensely, she for a trivial reason, and it can be quite funny to see how she's suffering. She might be crying because she wants me to sit on the sofa with her, but she won't move on and sit next to me, and that can seem quite funny, but for her that suffering is real, and that's the suffering that the Buddha talked about, the suffering of the mind, the suffering that we create ourselves. So for me, observing my dog creating unnecessary suffering, pretending that she's neglected or never been fed or anything like that, it seems, I laugh at it, but for her it's real. But with people it's slightly different, because their suffering has got a little bit more of a base, but it's still suffering. But then you realise that while there is maybe experience or trauma that's caused them to repeatedly suffer, you can see that they're the ones that's causing themselves the most suffering, and they're self-sabotaging. They're going from a domestic violence relationship to another domestic violence relationship, and calling it fate, or not knowing how they can get out of these cycles, and there's so much self-sabotage that you see, but at the same time as having compassion. So, and that's why the Buddha talked about the four Brahma Viharas, the sublime abidings, developing these states equally, so you can have that balance of mind that comes with observing the breath, and having that space between our personality and us, the observer, and then we can see the suffering in other people, but without compassion we can walk past them and say that's nonsense, it's all in their mind. But with compassion, we can say that's all in their mind, but it's real for them, and we feel obligated to help. But if we have compassion without that equanimity, without that balance, then again we're almost taking on their pain. So we're doubling the pain. The pain that was in their mind is now in our mind, and that's just more pain, and it's not productive for anyone, and it doesn't lead to liberation. Taking on other people's pain doesn't lead to their liberation or our liberation. Helping people does, and it's just trying to do that in a skillful way. We're all trying, we're all doing the best we can, and we're all dealing with our own suffering. Some of us have more than less than others, and some of us have unburdened ourselves more or less than others. But when we start to measure and compare, that's when we lose sight of what we're doing. Yeah, those are my thoughts for today.